It's me, Clyde Schaefer, or as one commenter called me, John Game Tank. I wanted to make a video about video, specifically how to produce a color composite video signal with basic digital logic on a breadboard. A few years ago, I made such a prototype while hacking my way towards building a game console. I had to figure this out from some old books and web pages and a lot of trial and error. So for everybody else interested in this level of tinkering, I wanted to share my findings in the YouTube format that I wish I had in 2019. I'm going to be borrowing from my slide deck from a previous convention presentation. The level I'm hoping to target here is sort of where I was a few years ago when I started the Game Tank project. The basics, this is we're going to be using digital logic chips, the original no-code dev tool. These are all chips that are going to act as building blocks that you put together to make larger, more complicated circuits. You have your combinational logic. These are things like not, and, or, exclusive or. Adders and multiplexers fall into this category too. These are sort of your Boolean logic gates. And then you have your sequential logic, which is anything that changes state over time. So its next state depends on its previous state and not just the current state of its inputs. And that's going to be any processors, memory, counters, latches, shift registers. We won't be using any processors and memory for this today, so this is all going to be pattern generation of color video. If you haven't seen a breadboard before, the gist is vertical aligned holes, they connect to each other internally, whereas horizontal don't. When you hook up these logic chips, generally there's a little circle cut out on here that's like sort of the top of the chip. So on the one end, on the right, is going to be the positive power input, 5 volts, and then a ground input on the opposite corner. And then when you want to connect two chips, you can just put a jumper in between these two, their respective breadboard holes. Very often, internally, you're going to have packs of 4 logic gates, for instance, if they have 2 inputs and 1 output, and they'll go from one end to the other's input, input, output, input, input, output, and similar on the other side. For sequential logic, we're looking at clocks a lot, and these are essentially just a voltage that goes low, high, low, high, low, high. Counters, as we'll see in a bit, can also act as frequency dividers, meaning that the first bit's going to be half of the original clock, and then the next bit is going to be half of that frequency, and so on. You can produce really any clock timing that you want by using a counter by feeding it back into itself, which I'll go back into more info later. Video, we have your inputs to a TV. The white and red inputs, they make enough sense. Audio is sort of a one-dimensional signal over time. It's just up and down. And this somehow does whole picture and color all at once. Well, as many people watching might already know, but just to cover our bases, the picture on a TV is actually scanning from left to right, and then it goes down the bottom, so it goes and all the way down till it hits the bottom of the screen. For each of these across lines, called the scan line, you have a sort of where it hits the voltage to 0 for a specific amount of time, and this tells the TV, hey, we're starting a new scan line. After that's a zone in which we have image data where more volts is more brighter, and you do that 242 times every frame, 60 times a second. I'm going to switch back now to the breadboard view again. And I'm just gonna get started on plopping some chips down, and I'm going to explain every chip as I go. We'll start off with our 28.636363 repeating main oscillator, and as we saw before in the slides, we can hook up its power at this corner to 5 volts, and pin this corner to ground. We have pulled this one out too many times and mangled it, but it's sticking. Now, plug this in. We've got some power going, and well, there's nothing much to see. So I'm going to pull up the oscilloscope view. This lets us graph a electrical signal to see the shape of it, and this is sort of how we know that we're making the right kind of output from our circuit to another device. So you want to put one end here to ground it for reference, and might need another wire so we can really get into the breadboard pin here. And then we need to zoom in and there we go. We can see on the scope in the bottom left corner, we've got 28.63. It's hovering around there. And this is going to be sort of the basis from which we derive all our other timing. From this, we can take a count. This is a 74HC 4040 4040. It's a 12-bit counter, and what it does is it counts up in binary, and its output pins go high and low, representing that same binary count that happens internally. So, as usual, power and ground on the corners. And you can hook up the output to the input. I think I have the wire here for the wrong side. Let me grab. Huh? That's the wrong one again. Here we go. So on this chip, what's going on here? On this chip, the second pin from the back on the right side, this guy here is the counter input. Every time a pulse comes through, specifically one of these, every time that goes up, this ticks this count. So we can try putting a pin onto here. It's the lowest bit of the counter, and we find that, oh, nothing's happening. And this is because we actually need to ground one more pin. This pin is called the reset, and whenever it goes high, the counter is reset to 0. I think this guy plugged in. Yeah. Oh, I plugged into the wrong. This guy. There we go. So tying it low keeps this from resetting, and that's because a pin that is left floating, is that's what we call it, is actually liable to sort of drift up and down in voltage based on its surroundings, and it can drift up past the threshold on that pin just from stray capacitance and trigger the other mechanisms of the chip. So we tie that distinctly to ground, and so now we can get 14 megahertz, 7 megahertz, scale this out, 3.5 megahertz, and so on. Each one of these bits is going to have half the frequency of the previous. It's a 12-bit counter, so it'll actually go up to 4,096 times slower, and we have to zoom way out to see that. And that gets us about just under 7 kilohertz. We're going to want to use the 3.5 megahertz output of this. We're dividing by 8, and as we called this 8x color burst, this is just the regular color burst frequency. The overall game plan here is that we want to generate a synchronization pulse that tells the TV when each frame and scan line starts. This is going to come from this documents from a description of the circuit for original Atari Pong, and we're going to do a couple of things different. Our main crystal is higher than 14, but the general plan is a crystal generates a frequency that gets divided. We have a horizontal sync circuit and a vertical sync circuit. Those get combined together into composite sync, and that's what the TV locks onto. So we start the horizontal sync circuit with another counter. They're using 2 counters and a flip-flop to get these bits, all the bits that they need. I elected to use a 4040 because it has 12 bits in one, and thus we don't need to use as many chips. So 4040 here. And power and ground. Probably should be doing ground first, but we're going from the 3.5 megahertz output to the clock input of this second counter. For now, to keep it from resetting all willy-nilly, we'll temporarily place a wire to tie this reset low, but we're going to replace that in a bit. And if we probe here, we can see that we've got some even smaller frequencies. We actually can go even lower than that original 7K down to about 800 hertz, 873. Oh, I forgot to scope. Let's zoom this back in. So the way this is going to work is that we're going to combine some of the various outputs of the bits of this chip. We need to combine, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to be referring to each of the outputs of these with an H for horizontal. This is the horizontal counter. And they're going to have numbers based off of the frequency division that is occurring from the original clock. So you've got goes 1H, 2H, 4H. These are, the original, a half of, a fourth of the original clock. And we're going to combine these together to sort of count to a specific number and then reset the chip. So what they've did in Pong here is that we've got 2H, 4H, 64H, out of focus, 128H, and 256H, all going into this symbol here. This is a NAND gate, but it's an 8-input NAND gate. And what NAND is, NAND is just and then negated. So when all of these signals are high, meaning we've counted to the sum of these values, that 454, that's when this is going to change its signal, its output. So we can take this 74HC30 is our 8 input NAND, and we'll give this power too while we're at it. On here, the output is going to be this last pin. Everything on this side is an input. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, not this side, that's ground, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7, 8 are over here. We're actually only combining 2, 3, 4, 5 signals, so 3 of them are actually just going to be tied high. So 1, 2, 3. And then we take inputs from here. That out of the way for a minute, and pull this up out of the way just to not block ourselves in. Yep. The amount of preparation that Ben Eater must put into his videos is unbelievable. Makes it look so easy. But you know, off camera, a lot of work's going on. Untie this input for reset. Now I'm going to try connecting the output of this NAND to the reset of the counter and take a look at the scope, and we'll see we're not actually getting the result that we want. And this is because the NAND is going to be high most of the time and then go low when that count is reached, whereas what we want is a signal that only goes high when the count is reached, not low. We refer to this as being active high or active low signals. So we need to invert this. It'll also help to extend this pulse a little bit, because what's going to happen is it's going to go like blip, and it's not going to be super useful for other parts of the circuit that we need later on. So next I'm going to add this chip. That's the 74HC74, and this is a pair of flip-flops. What that means is it stores a single bit of data to be used later. I have the data sheet here, and so this is going to line up that we have a, let's see if this will focus nicely. We have a clear input, a data clock preset, Q and bar, Q with a bar over it, and With that bar means it's inverted, so it's actually two outputs, one non-inverted, one inverted. On this side, what we want is to take the state of this, the output state of the NAND gate, and store it. So we're going to connect that to the D, the third input from the top corner here. Let's grab my tray of parts. So this, I believe, goes from here to here. Yep, that's the right one. And we're going to store that on the same clock pulse that drives the counter. The net effect of this is that the counter, the reset pulse will be extended by the timing of the counter. So let's get that here. We're going to go from, this is one of the distances that I don't have in my little wire kit. Is that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11? Yeah. So that goes there, and then you can either use data and clock. Data will be stored when the clock pulses, or you can use clear and preset. Clear and preset, or you can sort of consider it set reset. Whenever one pulses, it sets the output to a certain value, and the other one sets it to the other value. Sort of toggle switch. But on this side of the chip, we're not using that. So we're going to tie those. Those are active low. We're going to tie them high. This one over here, so that they stay out of the way. And finally, we can tie that inverted output back to reset. It's to the very end of the chip, pin 8. So let's pull the scope up again and take a look at that. And that's pretty much exactly what we want to see. This is 15.6 kilohertz, or 15.58, and it's just a little blip that happens for a single cycle. We can even compare that using the other scope probe to our clock. And what we see is that this lasts for one cycle. One cycle is when it's up, and then it goes down, and it goes back up again. So it includes both, and that's the length of time that lasts for. This is going to be called H reset in the terms of our schematic here. H reset comes back around and resets the counter. And that's how we can get pretty much any frequency we want out of a counter and a NAND gate and an inverter. We also want to produce a couple of other signals out of this. We want to produce H blanking is the horizontal blanking period. That essentially tells us when is it safe to send image data without interfering with the synchronization pulse. And finally, the actual H sync pulse is what the TV looks for to know to start a scan line. On here, this is a little bit cryptic. They've got this sort of X formation with two NAND gates. That's actually the same as that set and reset latch on the 74. So we can totally replace that with, not having to make a little contraption of NAND gates. There's other times we'll need to make contraptions out of NAND gates, but not now. We do, however, need to put a NAND gate for 64 and 16. So we're going to combine those. That's going to produce 80. The idea is that starting from H reset starts this pulse, and 80 ticks after that, ends it. So we grab another NAND gate from here, 74HC00. These come up quite a lot. Theoretically, you can make everything else out of them. And power that. And ground that. This is another jump size that we don't have exact wire lengths for in the kit. But I've pre-figured out which ones can reach. So, without even having to check the datasheet, I know that the pins go on any 2-input, 1-output logic gate goes input, input, output, input, input, output, and then on the top here, input, input, output, input, input, output. So it's fairly easy if you know it's just a basic logic gate to count that out. So we're going to use one of these inputs, so we're going to use one of these gates, input, input, and output, and that's going to feed back to one of these inputs on the 74. So 64H is already on there. And 16H. If we take a look at the data sheets again. This is for the 4040. So everything is actually sort of one offset by one on the way I've wired this. So we want 64 and 16. Q5 is going to be 2 to the 6, and Q3 is going to give us the 2 to the 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 for there. And then this output, which will go low when we reach 64 and 16, can be used to drive our set pin. No, I don't think so. I've shifted over this by 1 and skipped over that just to save your time. My wire for reaching this is not quite the right one as I had rehearsed. Now the brown wire from this kit, the long one, is the one that should reach 10 spaces, so we wanted to connect the output of this NAND to the clear input on this side, and that's going to, whenever we reach that condition of 64 and 16, this goes low, selling this to clear, and so that's going to undo the H blanking signal. H blanking is going to get set by H reset, and it's going to get cleared by 64 and 16, making it last from H reset to clock tick number 80. We also want to tie down to ground. Ground? Yeah, the data input, or the clock input rather, so that's the third on this side. And preset, well, it also comes from H reset, so we actually can tie from one side to the other. We're going to do the non-inverted, which is sort of active low, and bring that around to the preset, which is the fourth pin on this side. So 2, 3, 4. Drop it. And let's see what the has to say about it. The output of this is going to go to that, and if we take a look at that, we've got essentially a pulse that lasts a little bit longer. This is H blanking. H sync comes from taking positive H blanking and NANDing that with 32H. And 32H will become the third pin on the 4040. So 1, 2, 3. NAND gates over here. We need to reach a little bit further. This is the wire I used earlier. (32H) and make that one of our inputs to the breadboard here. And the other input this guy? No, I think it's a shorter one. Let's see if that's the right one. So we're looking at well, that doesn't seem quite correct. Oh, because it's not. H blanking and not H blanking. Here's 32H. And there we go. That is our horizontal synchronization pulse. This is the pulse that tells the TV to start a scan line, and I swap these out so we're actually locked onto it. Scale that out so we can see more than one and get the frequency. Again, that's 15 and a half kilohertz. So that we don't forget, we're going to need H blanking, or rather non-H blanking later. So here's a little flag that I made. For H blanking. The next step is vertical synchronization, and this is actually driven by H reset. I like to keep this organized with our higher frequency stuff here. Horizontal synchronization stuff is going to go on this row, and vertical is going to go up here. So let's put another counter, 74 HC 4040. And we shall tie him to ground by one leg. Oh, why is it bent? This is a really mean breadboard. And then provide power on this corner. It's the same one that's resetting this pin. So we can just tie those together. And, well, reset comes later because we know we're going to use a NAND gate for that. So this guy wants to count to 262. The flip-flop we're going to use extends that by 1, so we're going to try to form the basis of counting to 261. This uses 1V, 4V, and 256V. Similar to how I was calling these signals H1, H2, H64, or 64H. These are going to be 1V for vertical. I don't have any triple NANDs, that's what we're going to use here, so as I've done in Pong, we've got 1, 4, 256, go into a triple NAND. I don't have a triple NAND on hand, so we're going to construct one with a regular 2-input NAND. Ground and power. That's the one. I'm going to bridge this to this side back here. The idea is we can NAND together two of these values, invert that to get regular AND, and then NAND that with the last value. We'll also need one of these little double jumpers here. And we'll pipe that to the next gate as well. So that our final output can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9. I have lost the plot. I meant there's 2 on this side, so I should be doing them on that. Do 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 do. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This guy belongs here. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to want one of the little gray wires. And ending together 256V and 1V. Then we are going to invert that, which you do by passing it to the both inputs of another NAND gate. And finally, this guy can loop back around. Oh, right, this is not being reset, so just for a moment we reset this chip. Or keep it from resetting. And it also helps to plug the clock signal back in. So we're getting some signal out. Ultimately, our goal is to capture that with another 74 HC74. So let me just grab that one out. Boop. Next we capture, where's my same as before, we want to capture that on the clock, so this output, that doesn't reach. I need this guy maybe? Output from here, data pin. Oh, not quite. What comes after blue? Brown. From here, reaches to the third pin from the corner here. That's our data line. Wait. I don't know, just use the one on the same side. I'm going to use the one on the same side. It's much easier. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's going to be our yellow wire from this kit. I don't have that memorized. I have a chart in front of me. Clock is going to come from this same base clock again. that gonna reach? That's not gonna reach. Probably. A gray guy, I'm guessing. I'm gonna bend this to make it a little bit more aesthetic. There, that's the clock input of our 74HC74. And then clear and reset gets set to high. We should use these guys. Or reset can now be tied to the output. Let's double check which one is active low or active high. Oh. You? No. How about you? Yeah, there we go. So now we have V reset. V reset. There's my diagram again. V reset is going to be used to make V blank and V sync, which will combine with H sync to become composite sync. V reset, when it goes low, is going to activate vertical blanking, so we can do that again with the latch chip here. Go back to table view. Get this guy out of the way. So on here we're going to use the 1, 2, 4, 5, the second and the fifth pins on this side. The clock pin will tie low so it doesn't interfere. Fourth pin from this corner. Preset. Will come across from the active low side. Or, yeah. And then 16V will be what clears it. Is that clear, or do I need to invert that? I need to invert that. So we can use one more NAND from this side as an inverter. Single space jumper. Two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think I can actually use one of them good wire sizes here. Or not. No, I need third one down. Connect to this guy. And now this is going to have made our V-blanking signal. Oh, scope. As you can see, this is actually a roughly 60 Hertz signal. We need just one more thing to make composite sync. Now we already have H-sync down there, which I should have made a flag for. I believe that's going to be here. And we have V-sync up here. Oh, I'm going to get ahead of myself. I need one more NAND gate. Yes, so new NAND gate. Boop. And once again, it's a triple NAND. We want to NAND together V-blanking with 4V and inverted 8V, and that creates V-sync. So let's grab one more, or two more of these rather. Thinking for me. So we get 8V from this side. It's the fourth leg up from here. So that's going to be this guy. Jumps over to here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Did I really not reach that last time with a... I can reach that with a gray. Just barely does not make it. I can extend it. It's between chips, so I'll extend it with another single guy. So this is 8V, and we're inverting that as it says to do there. Next, we're going to NAND that with 4V. Which is third from that first corner, actually pin number 3 by the official numbering. That's not it. This is it. We need one more. Single jumper. So this is going to be not 8 NAND 4. Bring it over to the other side. Invert it to become regular and for a moment. Pass that to the next gate. With the oneer. And then now, this is going to be H blanking, or V blanking, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, I believe. I think that's one of these green guys does that. Let's take a look. This is, well, it's actually not V blanking, which means that that's not the VSync we want. The yellow comes off of here. V blanking is positive. We're saying the active positive V blanking is NANDing with this, and then well, that's not right. That's not right either. Definitely broke something. Okay, I'm back. I haven't changed anything on here except for my shirt. I've poked in these wires, and I think the reason I was getting some alternate readings of different kilohertz on the scope here was because something was loose. We are now seeing the expected almost 60 hertz. This is actually our vertical syncing signal, which means that the next thing that we need is simply the XOR gate. Pull up our diagram once again. So exclusive OR of VSync and HSync, or I guess not VSync and not HSync, becomes composite sync, and then we invert that. So we can pull out the 74HC86. Boop. And we're going to take the syncing output here, tie that to one of these gates. This in here. And we're going to need horizontal sync to come up from this other spot on the board. That should give us where is that? So one of these is going to be a higher pulse or a longer pulse. That's the one that we want to lock onto. There we go. Pulse longer than 5 microseconds. If we tie this over to, according to our document, it's actually negative composite sync. With an exclusive OR gate, you can think of it as being a toggleable inverter. So if you feed a signal to one input of an XOR gate, and then you feed 5 volts to the other input, the output will just be, it just becomes an inverter. Stick that on there. Switch that to track negative polarity. And now if I take a resistor from here, I've got a little breadboard adapter for composite video. Tie that to ground. And the end of the resistor. Let's pull up the TV screen that I just turned on. On this TV, it shows the text AV in when there's no signal. But after a few seconds of connecting an input, it disappears. And this is proof that we have now locked on to the signal with the TV. Now visually, of course, nothing is really happening that's interesting because we're not sending any image information. So we're going to want to try sending some patterns. If we do that, really, without regards to the timing of the synchronization pulse, then the image can interfere with the sync and the TV will lose it. But we can try moving around these connections, add another resistor. What I'm doing now is to create between these two resistors we can place the oscilloscope lead, because when I connect the video to that directly, it's going to pull that, let's see, so that goes away from the oscilloscope, but it just goes to the TV. If we put this here, we kind of have our cake and eat it too. And I'll mark this as a flag. It's my flag for video out. I have another one for composite sync. I've got another resistor in here for mixing picture signal. Oh, it's the same home. And now, one thing I can do is certain timings won't completely destroy synchronization. So let's just try poking around and see if we can find something that makes a picture. No, we lose sync, lose sync. If I stop that, the AV text goes away, but if I do that, see, we lose synchronization. We get some image, but it's distorted. If we weren't losing synchronization, these would be vertical stripes. So what we want to do next is create what I refer to as image enable. Got my flag prepared for it. The image enable signal is essentially just a combination of vertical blanking and horizontal blanking. That was here. So if I probe these, that's not it. I think it's this one. Not H blank, yes, that's right. And not V blank. Pull the second probe out for this. So now we're going to want to make a lot of our measurements relative timing-wise to the synchronization pulse. So if we do this, I can zoom us into a scan line. Each of these dips here, between those is one scan line of the TV. Vertical blanking, for instance. Low because, yeah, there we go. So it's during the vertical blanking period. And so we want something that that's high both when this is high and when this is high. As for spare gates, we've got one here. So let's connect these. One input from vertical blanking, and then an input from horizontal blanking. Should give us, oh, this signal, which has features both of, this is high for the vertical blanking period, and it's high for all of the horizontal blanking periods, which you can see are a little bit wider than H-sync. If we now invert this by using a NAND gate, hold on my jumpers. And then connect those two NAND gate inputs to each other, the output becomes a signal that is positive, that is high when we want to be sending image data. And this is image enabled. The utility of this is that we can now gate, for instance, with an AND gate, any pattern or image data that we are sending. Here's our 74HC08 and AND gate. Boop. And we're going to plug from here to one of these outputs. Image enable to one of these inputs. And now we should be free to plug other signals into it. What am I missing? If there's too much resistance, the composite synchronization pulse can get clobbered. There we go. So now we can monitor our video signal and our composite sync signal. So we can play with this. Right now I can hook this lead to either bits of the horizontal counter or the vertical counter. If I do the horizontal counter, the signal alternates up and down as it scans across the line, which means vertical stripes. Or we can alternate the signal for different scan lines entirely, resulting in horizontal stripes. By tuning into different frequencies, you can get different sized bars. And you'll see these will correspond directly. So on the left side we've got our two vertical stripes, and here on the scope you've got two sort of humps in the signal. Let's scan in on one line. What's up? And we can even combine them together using one of the AND gates. To make a grid. So we're counting across as well as up and down, and taking these two bits, and when they are both high or positive or 5 volts, it's going to go high on here and produce corresponding squares, or rectangles rather. Of course, we can use that to make really narrow stripes too. Combine them this way. Or we can use XOR as well. Off by one, I think. Yeah, here we go. Make a checkerboard. So now we have a pretty good standing for, this is pretty much where Pong diverges from here and starts implementing game logic directly in this kind of thing, where it's generating the ball and two paddles that are going back and forth. What I added on to this, of course, to make the game tank, was to add memory, but the other thing that I added that Pong did not add was color. So that's what I'm going to be doing next. Get these out of the way just for avoiding clutter purposes. I'll mark here as a Luma input that's gated by image enable. So now we can control the brightness at will. Wait, touch it. You can also sort of create little... Turns out hands are just capacitive jumpers. Anyway, the next thing we're going to need is to impose a color carrier signal onto this. Black and white TVs would have filtered it out. And when the color TV was invented, they added this as a backwards compatible way to have color and black and white TVs receive the same signal. Black and white TVs just display the grayscale version. And we already have the right frequency. We have a 3.5 megahertz guy here. Let's zoom in a little bit. What we'd like to do is to control this in a way that lets us use different colors. The way that the color carrier works is that it's phase control. Phase, I've made a little paper thing to demonstrate, is when you have a periodic wave and you're adjusting its forward-backward position in time relative to a reference. So if you have two sine waves, these are same phase. Phase is expressed in degrees because it's circular. Once you shift enough, you're back to the same picture again. So now we can say we're 0 degrees out of phase. 180 degrees out of phase. We'll back it up here to 90 degrees. And then 360 degrees of phase is just the same as 0. So we want to digitally control a version of this 3.5 megahertz wave and sort of slide it back and forth freely. To do this in a controlled manner, I have an approach that uses a shift register. This is the 74HC164. Boop. The function of a shift register is to create a delay. So the shift register, the 74HC164, you put inputs to A and B at the same time. It sort of takes both. it's got an AND gate in there essentially, and every time clock is pulsed, it advances that data through QA, QB, QC, D, E, F, G, H. If we were to put into A and B that 3.5 megahertz signal, we're sampling it, and then clock is the 8 times higher frequency, what's going to happen is that each of these is going to be outputting that square wave, but offset by 1/8 of the time of a full cycle. And this is going to create one where B is a little bit delayed of A, and C is a little bit delayed of B, and this cycles around to being at QH essentially the same original signal, that 360 degree. So, if we take this, plug this clock into, I think I need a shorter one actually. This 3.5 signal into one of shift register's inputs. Now you can already see as I'm touching this, it kind of leaks a little bit into, get a touch of color on the screen, unless it was too washed out by the camera. Anyway, we'll add a little jumper so that both A and B inputs are getting this. I'll actually ground the Luma input for the time being just to keep it from getting too noisy. That's another thing we can do. We can make it all bright or lighter. And there's also a clear, which we don't need, so we're going to tie that high. And then this is the right length already. Yeah, this is close enough length. I don't want to reach here. Green will do us favors. 28 megahertz from the main clock into the shift register clock. So let's take a look at the waveforms we get here. Here's version A. I'm going to zoom in. Fall out. And we'll see that this is kind of aligned. Zoom in even more, actually. So let's take a look. We'll watch that edge and where this lines up. That one's a little later. A little later than that. A bit later-er. E, F, G, H. And H is going to be remarkably similar to the input wave. And so, just like in our paper mock-up, we've got a 3.5 megahertz wave, and we've got options for that. But right now we've just got 8 of them being generated, and we need to sort of select them. And that's actually the purpose of the next chip being added. Pull this from the palette here. The 74HC151 is an 8-way selector. And this is going to connect to the outputs of the shift register. So the 151 takes 8 inputs, D0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and has 2 outputs, Y and W, which are sort of inverted of each other. Y is the positive and W is the inverted. And then A, B, and C represent a number in binary 0 through 7 that selects one of these to be routed to the outputs. And then G bar over here is just a enable for the whole thing. So if this controls whether the whole thing is either sending a signal or just flat, like off. And fortunately, the shift register has four outputs on this side, 4 outputs on this side, and then the selector has 4 inputs on this side, 4 inputs on this side. So this is about to be the cleanest set of wires on the entire board. As I connect this guy to this guy. These guys together. And these guys together. And then on the other side we have these. Now the order of them is going to mess up a little bit. But it doesn't hugely matter as long as we're able to select specific phases consistently. So that's here. Now, this is going to be able to select one of these phases that we've generated with the shift register, but we don't want it to output them all the time. We're going to use that G bar input with another signal that we're going to create called chroma enable. Got a flag ready for that. Chroma enable, let's check my note. there are two times that we want the chroma carrier to be in play. I'm going to use this for reference. And we can kind of zoom in onto the beginning of a scan line to tell us about that, or to see about that. In every scan line, we start with H-sync, and then there is the horizontal blanking period. I've currently set the image to be just pure, well, I guess gray right now, depending on the resistors, but pure, bright image signal is going out during image enable. And you can see there's a little bit of a shelf here going from H-sync to image. And this in between is where we're going to stick something called the color burst. In order for the television to meaningfully interpret that phase change, it needs a reference. And that's going to be a fixed phase. So we inject some color phase outside of image enable into this zone, but we also want it to happen during image enable. So first we're going to construct a signal that is going to shape this, essentially, and then we're going to combine that with image enable so that we get a signal that enables the chroma carrier. The shape of this color burst is going to come from the end of H-sync, so this is actually going to correspond with H-blanking, and 64H. 64H is when this period begins. So we're going to NAND together H-blanking and 64H, but we also want to NAND it with not V-blanking, because that is going to... We don't want this color burst to happen during vertical blanking. That'll also throw the sync off. So that's three things we need to NAND together. So we need one more NAND gate, and we're going to stick this over here. Whoop. And build another triple NAND. That's going to be based on not V-blank, H-blank, and 64H. So first, we'll prepare 64H and H-blank to be NANDed there, and that's going to lead to a next gate. And we know since we're building a triple NAND, this will invert that for the next NAND. I kind of want to go from here to here. It's going to... necessitate one of these gray guys, I think. So H-blank. And to there. And then 64H, if I check my list of these bits on here, that's going to be from up here. I think, and this doesn't reach. I need the long one. red? Yeah, red does it. So let's check our work. Now this is very close to what we want. This is the period that we're looking for. There's that shelf, and there's the burst. But we also want to make sure this does not happen, as I said, during v blank. So let's grab we would actually need a longer guy for this. Make a little wire. Thread that into the v blank source. And I think we can park it within this under. And then this guy can jump to this first input. And we jump the other input over from the other side to complete the NANDing. And so that's our burst. If we tie this directly into the output of our selector, well, it will be incomplete because we want also image enabled. So let's get the image enable connected into this. We're going to do that with a free spare gate over here. Well, let's take a look. What do we have? We have not that. So we do kind of need a... I think the AND gate will actually serve us here. Because an AND gate actually can be used sort of as a negative OR. So the negative time we want to have combined. So we want it to be low here, but we also want it to be low here during image enable. And when you have an AND gate, if either one is low, then the output is low. So we take our AND gate that we've already got up here, plug into the output of our NAND, and for the other, we want inverted image enable. So let's plug that in. the hell? Now we should get a signal that's low both times. Then we can map this back to G bar on the 151. We are in the spaghetti factory phase, or we've been in that for a while, as you can see. So now we've got these three inputs. We want to put these. Let's call these color control A, B, and C. That's going to be here, here, and here. I'm going to space them out a little bit more. They're actually going to get moved in a minute. I'll explain why. If we to look at the phase control there, now you can see we can sort of control that phase a little bit. I'm using my hands as a capacitive jumper to influence the pins. You can see they move ever so slightly. Look at that, we're just bumping them along. What we need is to have a specific phase at the beginning during that burst time, and then a arbitrary phase after. So the final chip that's required to make this work is a 74HC257, which is another selector like the 151, but instead of selecting one of 8 inputs to go to one output, it selects one each of 4 pairs of inputs to go to 4 outputs with one shared selection bit, which is ideal. We have 3 bits that we want to control at once, and then during a certain time flip them to a specific value and let other values through other times. So these out of there, we're going to start with these 3 outputs. I'm actually going to move these jumpers out for a moment. And I think I'm going to need more arrays. This is in a similar arrangement to the logic gates, in that we have... Actually, I don't really need to move those at all. I'm going to use these gray jumpers the entire time. So one of these goes to... I'm going to pause this, but the cat wants attention. Okay, the cat has decided to explore on her own. I forgot where these were going. This is controlling this guy. And this is going to control this guy. And then we want to have each of these input bins controlled by one of the gates on here. Oh, I forgot to do the boop. It's really good that I started magicking these power connections on, because it normally takes a bit extra time to shove them into the board. So these are laid out similar to the logic gates. They go in the form of kind of input 1, input 2, output, input 1, input 2, output, and there's one select bit over here, which is shared between them. So if I forgot to put my chroma enable flag. Here we go, chroma enable. There we go, I'll put it to the side. Our 257. So here's our selection bit. Okay. Where is it in the better focus? And input 1, input 2, output, input 1, input 2, output, and then there's a little output enable pin over here for a sort of global enable. So this is going to go to one of the outputs. It's going to go to another output. Or, which one was the output again? 1, 2, 5, 1, 3. Actually, there. And then the last one here. And one more on this side. Two, 3, 4. For our output enable, we're not going to actually use that feature, so I'm just going to tie that to ground. Keep the output of this one always enabled. And now we need to tie other ones to ground, so we're looking for when during the blanking time. So the blanking time comes from this back here. Let's double check that. Yeah, so there's our blanking time. We want when this blanking time is low. So we're going to go from here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Red jumpers. When that's low, we want to send a consistent value to our color selector. And so when it's low, that low bit is going to select the first input of each pair. And just to keep that simple, we're going to tie these to ground, so that whenever it's burst, this is getting 0, 0, 0. Tie it in, I guess, the output, this guy. And then our other inputs are going to be chroma A, B, and C. And now you'll see as I screw around with that, if I take a jumper wire. Let's say I take one of these and I connect it to power and ground, and we can see I can cause a little shift here. That shift is now isolated to the image enable section. So what remains is to actually mix this into our video signal. And for doing that, we have a capacitor and resistor. The resistor sort of modulates that a little bit, so it's the... This was the guy I needed. Well, do a little right angle over here. So I need a slightly longer one. Up there. This resistor also acting as a jumper. What we want, though, is for this frequency to only this high frequency being carried over. If we simply mix this in with the resistor, the average DC value of this signal is going to pull on the output. And so by placing this through a capacitor in series, we're actually only letting the high frequency component through, meaning that it can wiggle the resulting mix up and down, but it won't overall drag it into a particular direction. So let's just see. I want to get to up here. So I think I can do that with the gray. And wow, would you look at that? We have color. And since they're not tied to anything, the color can sometimes vary a little bit. So if I take this and if I have one jumper for color A, another jumper, color C control, and another jumper for color bit B, we can take that pattern that we did before and create a nice little grid here. I'm going to adjust the settings on the TV cam. It's hard to capture it on a little webcam, but I wanted to use a real CRT so you can see the live effects of losing and gaining sync that wouldn't be as obvious on a capture card. Yeah, we have color now, and of course we can change the brightness as well. Even pin that to another. This jumper's not long enough to do that. Let's pin it bright for now so we can see these colors. And we actually do have several distinct colors, or 8 distinct colors available, really. Little candy shop there. And there we go, color video generation. As a bonus, we already have a 4040 counter on here to count cycles of the 28 megahertz chip. We have a counter that produces counts of towards the H sync, and then one that makes V sync. We could use another counter. Stick this guy up here to count V syncs, as in we're going to count frames, so time across multiple pictures. Boop. Since we don't need to count to a specific number before resetting, I'm going to tie reset to ground, and we can let the counter roll over at 4096. Then I'm simply going to take one of the 60 hertz signals and blank. And we're going to tie that to the input of this counter. So we can take this Luma, for instance, and produce a blinking. Or, if we tie to multiple bits, we can count up through the colors. This will cycle through all 8. We get the oscilloscope back onto the video output. So now you can actually see, as the color changes, we've got our wiggle of the color carrier. And unlike what you might expect from seeing up and down on here, we're not getting vertical stripes like we do for, if I plug this into luminosity. Where's my wire? Let's use this guy. So if I plug my Luma signal into the horizontal counter again, you'll see it goes up and down. And that does cause alternating stripes for brightness stripes, but we don't get stripes from this. And this is because above that frequency is not something that there'd be pixel density to show anyway. So the TV filters that and instead captures that for color information. So that phase is how it knows which of the hues to show while scanning. And, well, that's pretty much it. I have some other patterns, or I can do I can include this into the sequencing. So now we are showing 16 possible states. Or even work them into the box pattern that we make. Oh, that doesn't reach. I'm going to use this one instead. So there you have it. Color video on a breadboard, and getting this picture onto the TV. Not a single line of code was written. Truly the original no-code development environment. I hope that was more informative than confusing. I prepared a whole outline to follow and rehearsed building the circuit off camera, but I'm sure it'll still come off a little bit more disorganized than I'd like. Extending this circuit is how I built the Game Tank, my open source 8-bit console. If this kind of tech is your bag, you can check out the project at gametank.zone. While all the parts lists and board files for the Game Tank are freely available and anyone can build it without my involvement, I'm also working on a crowd supply campaign to build a big batch of pre-mades. These use surface mount components of the same parts to make it cheaper, but it is still every bit as hackable and open as the DIY unit. As I record this, there's 2 weeks left in the campaign, and you can check it out at gametank.zone/crowdsupply. Thanks for watching!